بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. مساء الخير ضيوفنا الكرام، يا هلا فيكم بحفل إعلان مشاركة الكويت في معرض العمارة الدولي في بينالي فينيسيا. نشكركم على حضوركم. ضيف الشرف الليلة هو معالي السفير الإيطالي السيد فابريتسيو نيكولاتي، وأيضا وكيلة وزارة الدولة لشؤون الشباب السيدة زين الصباح، والسيد سامر خنشت الرئيس التنفيذي للعمليات في شركة مشاريع الكويت، والرئيس التنفيذي لشريكنا العقاري شركة العقارات المتحدة السيد محمد السقاف، ونيم المطر نائب الرئيس التنفيذي في الشركة. يا هلا فيكم. أعرفكم على نفسي، أنا دانا الجودر، معمارية في المكتب العربي للاستشارات الهندسية، وأنا من فريق البحث. أعرفكم على زملائي: زهرة علي بابا، معمارية، النائبة المفوضة للمشاركة، وهي من إدارة الشؤون المعمارية والهندسية في المجلس الوطني للثقافة والفنون والآداب، والفنانة عليا فريد عبدال القائمة على المشروع، أيضا من قسم الترميم والأثار في المجلس الوطني للثقافة والفنون والآداب، والسيد حسن حياة معماري في دار استشارات الجزيرة، وعضو في لجنة مشاركة الكويت في بينال البندقية. Dear honorable guests, on behalf of the National Council, we welcome you to the announcement of acquiring Modernity, Kuwait's pavilion at the International Architecture Exhibition of laBiennale di Venezia. Our guests of honor tonight are His Excellency Mr. Fabrizio Nicoletti, the Italian Ambassador to Kuwait, Undersecretary of the Ministry of State of Youth Affairs, Ms. Zain al-Sabah, Mr. Samir Khanashat, Group Chief Operating Officer of KIPCO and CEO of our real estate partner, United Real Estate Company, Mr. Mohammed al-Saqaf, and Executive Vice President, Mr. Neem al-Matar. We thank you for joining us. I am Dana al-Jodar, architect at PACE and a member of the Kuwait Pavilion Research Team. On stage with us tonight, we have architect Zahra Ali Baba, who is the Deputy Commissioner from the National Council, our curator, Ms. Alia Farid Abdal, from the Heritage and Restoration Department at the National Council, and Mr. Hassan Hayat, architect at Al Jazeera Consultants and member of the research team.
So, I need to take the blame for the delay, as my presentation was jamming up the technology over there. Sorry for that, and thank you for your patience and being with us here tonight for the announcement of acquiring Modernity. For those of you, it needs to be louder. So I'm going to begin my presentation with a slide of, it's an image on your left of where Zen and I sat at the announcement of the 2014 Venice Biennale. And it was the national participants meeting, and you'll see where we're sitting, the head of our pool house as he's announcing the overarching theme of the exhibition. So the way the Venice Biennial exhibition works is that they always invite an international curator who announces an overarching theme. And the countries who are participating that year can either respond to this subject that the international curators announce or kind of work on their own. But because this year is Rem Koolhaas, it would have been pretty disrespectful if we didn't respond to his theme. The Venice Biennial works also, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the format of the biennial, so I'm just going to do a little background. On even years, it's the architecture exhibition, and on odd years, it's the art exhibition. So it happens every summer, and then between that, there's also the film festivals, and there's contemporary dance, and all sorts of Venice Biennial exhibitions. But namely, it's the art and architecture exhibition, and I thought it was really interesting that this year I was appointed to curate the architecture exhibition when my background is in visual arts, and I was very interested in that relationship between art and architecture, and thought it would be really interesting that Kuwait's kind of looking at architecture from different perspectives, and so decided to even expand in that direction with assembling a team that kind of hails from different disciplines. And so my notes are exposed. In the next slides, I'll introduce you to our research team. And our research team, like I said, they hail from a range of disciplines, including art, architecture, visual and performing arts, theology, history, literature, and so we're 21 researchers that have been meeting every Saturday since September, and for the purpose of this project have been divided into 3 teams. So we have a publication team who's working on kind of the thick architectural research and compiling all of this information on the history of urban development in Kuwait into a publication, which is the legacy of our exhibition, and populating our website with the same information. We also have the fabrication team, which is, yeah, it has it hard because they're in charge of like the visual component of our show, which is what gets most attention, right? And so thank you, fabrication team, for being so wonderful, despite like really hardcore critiques. And then we also have, so our third team is the film team. And this is also, so this is an unusual component of our project, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later on in our presentation. So skimming forward. Oh, so these photographs were taken on the roof of the space that we're currently inhabiting. We've been meeting every Saturday, like I said, since September, in different locations. And initially our headquarters was the theater in Hawali, which is a really wonderful location. But it was lent to us by Sayman al-Bassam. And it was really wonderful to work there for a while because the dimensions of the space have similar dimensions as the pavilion. And so we were able to imagine the space that we'd have to kind of build an exhibition for. So that was really helpful. And then later we moved to the former department where the Heritage and Restoration Department was before it was in Qiblia. So Shirkة, and that's really wonderful. And so this photo shoot was staged on the roof, and coincidentally they had this backdrop that references the work that we're doing, because it's a backdrop full of like modern symbols of Kuwait. So that was really wonderful. So we all agree, and so we've had discussions in September about what is modernity in Kuwait, right? Because we're responding to this theme, absorbing modernity, which means kind of understanding how modernity affected local culture. And we all agree that modernity in Kuwait began with demolition, and which is a really kind of hardcore statement, right? But like, what are the repercussions of that? And so this is a photograph from 1957. From when the Sur was torn down and replaced with what became Sur Street. And this moment in history kind of symbolizes an expansion, right? So we tear down the wall that encapsulated our old city, and we replace it with a street and five roads that come out of each of the 5 gates that kind of open up the city, right? So this is kind of a very crucial moment. And this happens in 1957. And the next slide, please, is a photograph of the Kuwait National Museum in 1957 as well. So the first Kuwait National Museum was established in 1957 by the statesman Sheikh Abdallah al-Yabir in what was his former residence and the Diwan of Khazal. And so this photograph, we decided that we would focus our participation in Venice on the establishment of a national museum, and because this idea of like owning a museum is quite modern now. Like the museum institution is like the example par excellence of modernity. What it implies is that you are a culture that has kind of a meta understanding of yourself. You're able to reflect, imagine, and portrays idea about your own society. And so this is why we chose to focus our participation on this institution. And also because in the Heritage and Restoration Department, it is one of our projects. And that was another important thing for us. You know, it was like to look at the projects that are currently in the hands of the National Council and kind of re-articulate them or shed light on them through Venice or in Venice, or give visibility to these projects in Venice. So this is a photograph of the opening of the Kuwait National Museum, the first iteration. Some more photographs, please. And at the time, the National Council wasn't really the National Council. It was the Ministry of Education and Museums. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then it became the National Council for Culture, Arts and Letters, an arm of the Ministry of Information. This is a ground floor plan of the first Kuwait National Museum. And you'll see that they're very clear on what the objectives are of the institution. The institution is meant to be a place of education and enlightenment. It's not exactly like a school because it kind of addresses other things and is meant to be kind of supplementary to like universities or high schools. But it was always very clear that the role of the musician was to educate society and to encourage progressive thinking, innovation, and thought. And so there's this funny moment in the Kuwait National Museum. You'll see that like a lot of the stuff that's on display was stuff that was like happening or had just happened, you know, and even there's still some overlaps. If you'll go to the next image, this is one of my favorite installations of the old Kuwait National Museum. It's the dry aquarium, and it was this really beautiful installation. Evie describes it fantastically. That's at the basement of the Kuwait National Museum. The walls were painted blue, and they brought in coral reef, and they made these little divers hang from strings, from fishing strings. No? And so this is an immersive experience in the Kuwait National Museum. You walk into the basement and you experience, it's as if you're underwater, you know? And it's kind of stuff that was just happening like pre-oil discovery, right? And then there's also this sort of thing on display. It's clothing and stuff that's still being worn. There's this, like I said, there's a funny moment in the history of the National Museum where the people were seeing stuff that they hadn't yet renunciated. And so I found that to be really interesting. It was like the museum was poaching society to kind of turn modern. Next slide, please. Do you see what I mean, where it's like the bit of an overlap? And objects of everyday life that are still very much in use, you know? The next slide, I grew up playing dama, so it's stuff that's still pertinent to us today. And public art, also of everyday objects. Meanwhile, on the island of Felika, there was also 2 museums opening up, and so there's a proliferation of museums in the late 50s. And I found it to be very interesting that like the museums were inhabiting places that were being regarded as kind of important buildings. So the museum in Felika, the Archaeological Museum, what am I on about? The Archaeological Museum was established in the chalet of Sheikh Abdullah Salim. And this is a photograph of Tariq Rajab cleaning up some of the stuff that's been dug up and putting them immediately on display. So there's this really nice kind of museum treatment that's kind of very instant. Now it's like as the trenches are being dug up, they're brought in and they're cleaned and they're put on display immediately. And the modesty is really beautiful. The scale of the museum, the scale at which it operates, is very nice. And go on to the next slide. And then there's also this moment that very clearly signifies modernity, is that there's these locations that are then being, if you'll go to the next slide, please. They're being designated heritage sites. So this is also a very kind of strong idea behind modernity. You know, it's like places that were once being inhabited and used are suddenly distanced and become places that attract researchers and archaeologists and users at the same time is kind of strange. Of course, back in Kuwait, there's all of this happening. This is the central bank by Arne Jacobsen, which doesn't really look like this today, and we'll address this in our discussion later this afternoon. But what this project does, it looks at kind of modernist projects and the condition of these buildings today to try and understand what it is that our relationship to this architecture says about contemporary society. So this is the central bank by Arne Jacobsen. There's a new central bank being built. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen that. Another image of that. All of the images that we've gathered for the purpose of our project, we've succeeded at getting copyright clearance for, which is a huge accomplishment. We have done things properly, and it's been painful. But it's been really wonderful to know that we have allies at the Aga Khan program for Islamic art and architecture, and that we have allies in London. Like, we have mobilized people all over the world towards this project. And it's crazy that there's sometimes better documentation of things in Kuwait outside of Kuwait than there is in our own country. Like, it's a sad truth, and we'd like to change that. This is an image, we kind of struck gold here, and thank you, Noura Sagar, for setting up this meeting for us. Noura has been a wonderful, wonderful kind of researcher in this project. She scheduled a meeting for us to visit the Al-Qabas archives, and we found loads of really wonderful things. This is a really rare image of a presentation of the Kuwait Towers, and we got really excited because we thought it was actually Malin Bourne who was presenting her design. And it wasn't, because we sent the photograph to her son, Par Lindstrom, and he told us, no, this isn't my mother, my stepmom. And in the same email, he told us that she was turning 100 years old last month, and so that was really exciting. And he told her that people in Kuwait are still looking at your architecture. So. This is another really wonderful photograph that we were given permission to use by the Aga Khan program. And I really like this photograph because there's a guy who's standing on the skirt of the Kuwait Towers. And it reminds me of that film, Man on Wire. Have you guys seen it? Where he walks on a wire between the buildings. But it's a really precarious moment that's quite satisfying. The water towers was designed by the partner of Malin Bourne. And this is another symbol of modernity that we're looking at. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs by Rima and Riley Pileta. I said that wrong, I know. And then back to the Kuwait National Museum. So the Kuwait National Museum was the first architectural competition that was launched for the design of a modern building, right? Or a modern institution, and we decided that we were going to focus on the establishment of the two Kuwait National Museums. But in the second one, what we're doing is we're borrowing the programming to organize our research. And so, for those of you who don't know, the Kuwait National Museum compound, the iteration, the Mashallah shared iteration, it has 5 buildings, and they're each named different things. The next slide, please. So there's building 1, which is the administration and cultural building. It's the building we're sitting in right now. There's building number 2, which is Land of Kuwait. Building number 3, Kuwait of Today and Tomorrow.
No, that's 4.
No, sorry. Building 3 is Man of Kuwait, and building number 4 is Kuwait of Today and Tomorrow. And there's this anomaly in the museum compound, which is the planetarium. And so we're organizing all of our findings into this category to try and kind of make meaning or so when I think the fallout between the two museums, I feel like in the Diwan iteration, we were very much kind of in control, and like the museum was fully populated. And in this version, it was a sudden kind of, the scale changed a lot. And so I'd like to go, with this project, we kind of wanted to go back to when the museum was built and restage the opening of the Kuwait National Museum towards the rehabilitation of its programs. Because it seems like the Kuwait was never fully populated. The Kuwait National Museum was never fully populated. And then the war broke out, and that further traumatized kind of the museum. And it's been a really, really hard road to recovery. And so with our participation in Venice, we would like to do that, essentially. So our space in Venice is exactly the same space that was used in 2012. It's a very, very beautiful location in the Arsenale. And the Arsenale, it's hard to signal and imagine what's behind me. But if you see, there's two venues at the Venice Biennial. And the two venues are the Arsenale and the Giardini. And the Giardini is an area of Venice. It's a very beautiful location. It's the Gardens of Venice. And that area is reserved for the countries with official or permanent representation at the Venice Biennial. The other venue is the Arsenale, the L-shaped venue behind me. And that's available for countries to rent spaces, so countries that don't have permanent representation. And this thing, it kind of offended us. It's like, what do you mean we're unofficial? You know, like, what the dichotomy between like official and unofficial countries is really funny, or like official and unofficial representation. So, you know, while we're in the Arsenale and we really love our location, we also kind of wanted to infiltrate the Giardini. And so there's something later in this presentation that we'll talk about that. I think the next slide is a quick rendering of what our space will look like. It's an attempt to reconstruct the Kuwait National Museum courtyard, the courtyard space. Our pavilion is like 18 meters by 17 and a half. So it was kind of screaming at us like, I'm the kind of Kuwait, the Kuwait National Museum courtyard, and that's the area of the museum that we're recreating with the facades of each of the buildings. And so yeah, as I was saying, there's this area in Venice, the Venice Biennial, the Giardini, and the Nordic Pavilion in the Giardini. Yeah, please, thank you. The Nordic Pavilion in the Giardini is one of the most beautiful pavilions, and everyone knows this. Like they have an amazing sense of aesthetics, and everyone really looks forward to this exhibition. And for the purpose of our project, we managed to do a joint installation with them. It was hard negotiation, but we told them, you know, you guys have designed stuff in our country, and we want to give it back to you. And so we're doing this joint installation that's installing a Maisabil water fountain, a drinking fountain, in front of the Nordic Pavilion, infiltrating kind of the Giardini, and giving the city of water more water, or a sadaqah, to say. And this is Amar and my dad shopping for the water fountain. And that's what, I mean, you guys have seen it, no? And so we're very kind of directly responding to Rem's theme when he says, how is it that local culture absorbs modernity? We're returning to them an example of how in our tradition we have appropriated a form of modern architecture. And then this final component that I was talking to you about, I hope I haven't taken you on like a wild presentation. I hope everyone's still with me. But like I was saying, we're organizing our findings into the categories of the Kuwait National Museum. And like I said, the planetarium of the Kuwait National Museum compound is a strange kind of anomaly, and this kind of space of imagination, right? And so under the planetarium, we're working on under the headline of the planetarium, we're working on a script, and for that script, we're doing a movie, and that's really that's generously being funded by the United Real Estate Company, and the movie is this component of our project that's meant to be developed over the course of the exhibition. So it's a movie that's shot between Venice and Kuwait. In Kuwait and in this funny location called Kuwait in Venice, to continue kind of the project and to bring back something from the project. So to return the visibility of the project, not in kind of a straightforward form of documentation, but in a kind of artistic kind of format. And so that's the film team. That's what the film team and the script writing team is working on. Up until now, it's been insane. Since September, we have welcomed reviews and guest critiques by Anthony Montadas, Gediminas Urbonas, Ezra Examija. These are all professors and architects and artists at Harvard and MIT University. Harvard. MIT and Harvard University, their students. We interacted with also the Kuwait University's College of Architecture, and our project continues kind of engaging with local and international communities. And the hope is that will continue kind of working long after Venice. Venice is only one moment of visibility in a large project that aims to restore cultural rigor in Kuwait. And so these are now this is sort of documentation. These are some images of our early research meetings in Hawali Theatre. This is us in Failaka. This is us with the MIT group visiting Kuwait, up in the Liberation Tower. This is down. We did a fantastic. How would you describe it? It was like a tour of Kuwait, but from this cylinder.
It was an overview of Kuwait City from the Liberation Tower, which was an amazing start for the students to understand how the city worked. And then we took them on a walking tour. So we walked through Kuwait City, and they understood how we lived.
Yeah, it was basically looking at the city from a bird's eye view and a worm's eye view and that whole thing. But that was also arranged by Noura and a fantastic experience for everyone, because we who have lived here all of our life I had never been up to the Liberation Tower. So that was a real awesome experience. This is us visiting the Dar al-Athar al-Islamiyya collection, and we also got to see the house. This is us on a walking tour of Hawali with architect Ricardo Camacho sitting there in the back. Thank you so much for that, Ricardo. And this is us doing presentations with the Kuwait University's College of Architecture. So the whole, like the Venice biennial team, KU, and yeah, so we're all sharing presentations in MIT. And this is us having dinner at Shamam. Thank you, Summer, for that wonderful recommendation. It was a wonderful feast. And this is us well, not all of us. Not all of us could go on the 6 year. Actually, only I and only Oscar and I. But we actually managed to get on top of the water towers as well. So we've been far and wide with this project, and thank everyone for the support. The project will continue again after Venice, and that's what Hassan's we'd like to talk about the longevity of the project. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, Alia, for giving a background on the activities that have taken place during this exercise. It's been great to meet new people and to collaborate for the sake of our culture, for defining it, for developing it, for understanding how it mixes into everything else. I'm going to briefly discuss some of the research findings we had, talking about Kuwait a little bit, about the history, and about how we can take this into our everyday lives and how it can affect other projects. Next, please. I'd like to thank our sponsors. This is truly a great opportunity for public-private participation in a multidisciplinary capacity. This is something that is needed. This is what gets our juices flowing, and how we could start discussing about things and really start questioning what we already know and what we see every day in a different light. And this has been great for me personally, and I'm sure it's been great for everyone else on the team. Next, please. Old Kuwait. In response to Ram's overarching theme for the project, we had to discuss absorbing modernity, 1914 to 2014. And for us to develop a point, an opinion about this, we had to first go and look through the archives, through the data, find out what we could find out about Kuwait before we start selecting something, before we focused on symbols of modernity, before we looked at the museum in great depth. We started looking at what Kuwait was, going back to our roots. Kuwait was a humble town, a coastal town. It was very much connected to the water, and life was simple, and life was peaceful, and was protected by the sewer that Alia was talking about, that was demolished in the 50s. You could see that there was an attention to human scale. Society was very much married to its environment at this point. Next, please. And after World War II, with the exporting of oil, we started importing new materials and new technologies that changed the way we designed our buildings. At the same time, the master plans were being developed to re-strategize everything, to bring a brand new identity to our built environment. And this was made possible by the rapid development of the economy and the further globalization of Kuwait. Next, please. And this modernity kept on growing. And here's a great photo that was found in the KOC archives. It was taken in 1962, and it shows the development of Fahd al-Salam Street, greatly contrasted against the old Kuwait. And you could see here what was emerging. This was something new. It was different. And this is something that to this day we still struggle with defining and having an identity with. Next, please. And this growth kept on growing over time. And with that came some wonderful works that were imported, acquired. And these are the symbols of modernity that we focused on in our research. Here you could see projects that range from the monumental, the institutional, the leisure infrastructure, the souks, trying to bring life back into the city as it was being erased with the implementation of the first master plan. These are symbols that we had a great time finding out about, but it wasn't easy. To find this information, everyone had to use all their resources to really dig up boxes out of the back of storage containers in Sabhan. But we did it, and we're very proud to present this information, and we're happy. Next, please. And this is how we should be treating our symbols. We should be happy about what we have. Yes, modernity is a difficult thing to deal with. Life as we know it is difficult. It's not easy, but we should always be optimistic. We should always try to find these things that identify us and we identify with. Next. And we could look at the different attitudes towards modernity over time by looking at everyday objects such as money. Here we have two banknotes on the right from the 60s, I believe, very clearly showing old Kuwait and new Kuwait. But in the later banknotes, we see how they tried to marry the two, as if modernity had to be excused by referencing it to the old. So over time, our faith in modernity slowly withered and disappeared. And this is something we have to deal with. This is something we have to bring back. This confidence is required. Next, please. And the attitude towards modernity deals with issues and buildings that are disappearing in front of our eyes. The Chamber of Commerce building on the left. I wish I'd known about this demolition. I would have loved to have one of those concrete faceplates there. A great group. Many of the Biennale participants were involved in this event. Sorry. It was organized by Sarah, Zahra, sorry, who spoke to you earlier, and we must consider what will happen to Sawaber. These are not perfect buildings. They are not idealistic entities. They are things that are unique to Kuwait, and they have to be looked at as such. Next, please. And in the Law of Antiquities, it very clearly states that the antiquities, the buildings, need to be studied, they need to be preserved, and they need to be recorded. Obviously, this wasn't the case because we had to dig up all that information. If it were available to us, that would have been a great help. And this is something that we think that more of these kinds of participations could achieve. Next. I was part of the publication group. I'd just like to talk for a minute about how we looked at the buildings of the museum, of the Kuwait National Museum, and assigned topics and particular symbols to each one of those. The first building here, where we are, Daniel Joder, who introduced us tonight, wrote a great piece about the difficulties of obtaining information, and she discussed at great length the Kuwait Central Bank building, and the transformations that happened over time and what that reflects in today's society. Aisha Sagar discussed many of the symbols that were already discussed, the water towers and other symbols of water, because and she talked about how this over time transformed as the coastline was reconditioned. Our connection between the urban environment and the sea has changed. Sarah Saragosa discusses Man of Kuwait. She discusses what the identities of people were towards modernity. How did they deal, the attitudes towards modernity? How did they react? And how did the sudden transformation after the first master plan, how did that affect social consciousness? And I discuss Kuwait of today and tomorrow. And in this I talk about the master plans and how that affected growth and order within the city. Next, please. And again, I just want to remind everyone that we can have fun with these symbols. I think this kind of spirit of reclaiming these symbols and making them part of our everyday life can really benefit everyone. We can really start some interesting discussions and bring nice motivation towards the future. And I just wanted to relate that to our team. And again, we all fell in love with symbols of Kuwait, and we hope you do the same. Next, please. To look at the future, we have to really consider the things that are being done today. We all acknowledge the need for pedestrian environments. This is something that helps society meet and gather, and was honestly removed and replaced by the automobile with the master plans. And while we need more of these places, we need to really be considerate about their sustainability. A project such as this one is great and has done great things for the commercial sector, but the amount of energy it uses to air condition that space is something that needs to be questioned. And on the left, again, great transformations of the environment with the Khiran projects, creating great aesthetics, very marketable products, but is that what is best for the future? Next, please. And here we are today in Kuwait City. Many empty spaces, much congestion, office buildings that are mostly vacant, that are being filled with temporary stopgap measures. How can we take opportunity of these spaces, these voids, and program something that would really benefit Kuwait? How can we get Kuwaitis to start inhabiting these spaces and being productive? Productive in terms of business, productive in terms of occupying the space, but also productive in terms of ideas, in terms of exchange. And this is something that we see can really happen with what we already have. We don't need to demolish all of this to build something new. We just need to think carefully, plan properly, and move forward. As I said, the optimism and the hopes are there. We just need to realize them. Next, please. And here's the contrast between the old and the new Kuwait. Aesthetically, there are similarities, but as you see, there's been a band of reclaimed land around the city, and that has very much changed the condition, the relationship between the person and the environment. And this is where I'd like to leave it off tonight. We were hoping to raise some issues, raise some topics, and bring you all into an active participation about what we discussed.
Yeah, the underlying question here is, what is the future of heritage in Kuwait, right? We at the National Council belong to this department, Heritage and Restoration, but we haven't really been looking at the future of heritage in the sense of modern architecture, and I think that's what, with this project and especially with what Zeta is doing is kind of foreseeing what might happen to a series of projects that were commissioned over the 60s, 70s, and 80s that are now kind of endangered. We have a fantastic project, which is a waterfront development project in Green Island that is literally endangered. And what it meant was really valuable. It was 22 kilometers of public space that's now kind of at risk, right? So what is the future of heritage? And that's the question with which we'd like to open up our discussion here tonight. Thank you so much for your patience. The project's crazy. It's crazy heterogeneous and wants to do and say and be a lot, because I feel not enough opportunities to do and say and be a lot are granted. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
That's it.